Spring football, Jake. We get to hear from Matt Rule and what is, I think, 2 or 3 players tomorrow for the first time after practice. So we don't know what happened today. I assume they went out on the field in practice because we were told they were going to. Practice number 2 is tomorrow, press conference to follow. So we will be dissecting all of that information tomorrow. So I've got all these lists in front of me. Okay, I got these different lists, 5 keys to Nebraska's storylines. Okay, and then I've got another one, what is it called? The 4 questions for Nebraska spring ball for Nebraska football heading into spring ball. And by the way, Dylan Raiola is like all over both of these lists and other lists that I've looked at too. So we will chat about Dylan Raiola at some point. There's all these question marks. We have hired so many new coaches. Okay, we have a ton of new players. We're not going to have a spring game for the first time ever. There is so much new, 29 new faces for spring ball in this Nebraska football team, by the way. How many of our starters will be new next year? We don't know the answer to that yet. We could sit here and project. How many are going to be new next year? Well, probably over half the team, starting with the defensive line and a majority of our linebackers and things of that nature. What is the biggest storyline? Because we can go through all of these. In your mind, and I want to know, ladies and gentlemen, text in. All right, what's that number, Jake?
402-464-5685.
It's still the same. But text in the number one storyline in your mind. What's the biggest question you're looking to get more information about? I don't know that we get full answers in the spring when it comes to the fall. Okay. But what is the biggest thing you're looking to get a significant amount of more information about this spring? Let us know. What's the first thing or the biggest thing that comes to your mind, Jake? And then we'll talk about that topic. I don't know what you're going to say, so I'm very intrigued.
Well, I mean, there's lots of moving parts, lots of things to dissect, like you said. But I think if we're honest, we all know that the focus for Husker football fans is going to be on Dylan Raiola and how much better he can get and prepare himself to get better for this sophomore year. You know, that kind of pairs along with Dana Holgorsen going in there and having full control of the offense, right? Not just inheriting an offense and trying to make the best of it. So, there's a lot of question marks all around the team, but Dylan Raiola is going to have the most intrigue. And I was going to ask you this because, it's not just, it's not a secret. A lot of people will say and know in football that you will often take your biggest jump from freshman to sophomore year. Do football players, Dylan thinking that when he steps on the field today for the first day of spring, he says, okay, I'm supposed to get way better this year. Here's the start. Is there added pressure on him this spring?
Oh, there's absolutely added pressure. First of all, the last name, the 5-star recruiting ranking, the process that unfolded. And I've said all offseason, you want to appear at basketball games, you want to appear at all these things, cool, better win. You don't think that adds pressure? I could argue a little bit self-imposed. If you're going to appear publicly, that's awesome. Better win. That adds pressure. I think that's a fair thing for me to say. And I have no problem with him and Emmett going out doing their thing as long as the results on the field follow. The way I've always phrased it is, if that's part of the package, then that's cool. Is there added pressure? Absolutely. The expectations go up, and they rightfully should. Not once before we play our first game in Arrowhead versus Cincinnati will you hear me use the words Heisman, All-American, any of that stuff, because I think that's too big of a jump to expect. What we've talked about in the past and what I'll bring up again, first of all, the Big Ten has a bunch of new quarterbacks. Oregon's got a new quarterback. Ohio State's got a new quarterback. Michigan's got a new quarterback. Illinois, has a returning quarterback. Penn State, Drew Aller. How many other teams outside of Nebraska, Illinois, Penn State realistically have a returning quarterback? It's so many new faces this year. And here's, in fact, something else. I didn't know if I'd use it today, but here we are. The 4 teams, when you just look nationally, the 4 teams with the best odds to win the national championship as we sit right here, right now, and I'm not saying Nebraska's a national title contender right here, right now. Too early to talk about anything of that nature, but just in general, the 4 teams with the best odds to win the national championship of college football next year are Texas, Georgia, Oregon, and Ohio State. They will all have brand new starting quarterbacks. And they all, this is the part that stuck out to me the most actually, return less than 50% of their production from last year. It's probably going to be a chaotic year. And I thought this was a great line. just in general, when there's so many question marks, having a little bit of returning production, experience, okay, it depends on the situation. Because if you don't see very well, out of one eye and you only got one eye, you're going to say, I have bad vision. But depending on the situation, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man all of a sudden becomes a king. What I mean by that is we have a few things that other teams don't. There's things that we don't have that other teams do. When you have a returning starting quarterback, okay, the expectations will go up. I have said, and we did a segment, I think in January, where I asked the question, is it fair to ask if Dylan Raiola will be one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the Big Ten? And I think that's a fair thing to ask. And I don't think being like, hey, which would mean first team All Big Ten, second team, third team, honorable mention. It means he's some sort of an all-conference quarterback next year. I'm not even saying first team, but is there something all-conference, blank, honorable mention, blank, second team, all-conference? I think that's a fair expectation for Dylan Raiola next year, given the hype, given the offseason, given the experience, given the talent, given the tools brought in around him through the transfer portal, wide receiver. You got a solid starting running back. You got Dana Holgorsen calling the plays. We're in year 3 under Matt Rule. I feel like it's a very fair expectation, and the expectations have increased. I had to talk several people down last year when they'd get mad at me about halfway through the season. But Adam, he was a 5-star, still a freshman. But Adam, all the hype and talent, he's still 19 years old. Well, now I'm going to sit here and say he's not a teenager. He's not a true freshman. He's the most experienced returning true freshman quarterback in the entire country. Played more snaps, threw more passes, played more than any other true freshman quarterback in the entire country. So it's fair that the expectation, if you want to phrase it with the P word, pressure, and pressure is a privilege. If people don't expect anything out of you, then there's no pressure. That's almost an insult. If people don't expect anything out of you, pressure is a privilege. Expectations are a privilege. They have absolutely increased. And I love the way you phrased it at one point. We should win games because of Dylan Raiola, not in spite of Dylan Raiola. You got any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it like you said, it's a big year. I mean, I obviously looking at the all Big Ten type of teams, you know, Drew Eller is seemingly far above anybody else. Like you said, Luke Altmaier in there. Don't forget Jaden Mayava. I'm going to keep bringing him up. I think he's got.
He only started 3 games, so I forget. But that's a good point. Yes,
but I think he's going to be pretty solid. So when you look at that, though, I mean, I don't think anybody outside of Allers probably, even with how good Altmaier and Mayava looked at times last year, I don't think they're necessarily locks to be all Big Ten type of quarterbacks. So I mean, it's obviously out there, but it's going to be a lot to ask. I'm glad that you said, you know, I think mid-year last year, and I keep bringing this up, is that we probably, if it hadn't replicated the second half of the year as the first half of the year, we would be talking Heisman. We would be talking, you know, taking that huge step to be an All-American. The way that last season ended, I think it's fair to kind of pull that back a little bit. You can hold it off. Maybe wait till junior or senior year. Hopefully takes that step so that we can put him in that conversation going into next season.
Well, I'm saving that for next year. I am. Junior year. You know, like you said, maybe senior year. If at the end of this year, it says Dylan Raiola, 3rd team All Big Ten, there's some people who are going to be like, dude, he was a 5-star. He started for 2 years. He should be at least first team. Argument to be made there. I'm not saying he can't be first team. I'm not saying he can't be All-American. I'm not saying he can't be these things. When you talk about expectation, it's a realistic goal in front of us. That's how I define expectation that I literally just made up on the spot. A realistic goal that's in front of you. Okay? Not far-reaching, not underachieving. Realistic goal that's in front of you. Is that a good definition? I literally just made that up.
Say it again.
You know, stop taking naps over there. Realistic goal that's in front of you. Is that a fair definition of expectation?
Yeah.
Literally just made it up. I'll be honest with you. I don't even think honorable mention All Big Ten. If it said that, I'd be okay with that. But I think second or third. Drew Aller is going to be the heavy favorite to be first team All Big Ten. Penn State has a ton of returning talent. they're easily going to be a top 5, if not top 3 team in the preseason poll next year with all the returning talent that they have next year. If they can find any wide receiver to just catch a football at some point, they might be preseason number 1 or 2. Texas with Arch Manning is a lot of people's preseason number 1. Gag me you, but I get it. I understand it. We were to do a preseason poll, I'd probably put them there right now. And I wouldn't be very happy about it, but I try to be objective outside of the SEC. So my point is simply this. I think it's very realistic to look at Dylan Raiola and be like, it should be blank, all Big Ten, which means, hopefully, and to give more specific goals than just that. Because I said last year, I would like him to complete at least 60% of his passes. I would like him to have a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio and just do what it takes to move the chains. That was my only goal. And if you think back to 2 years ago, that would have been a gigantic upgrade from what we had 2 years ago. Okay, with all due respect to the quarterbacks from a couple of years ago. He completed 67% of his passes. His touchdown to interception ratio wasn't quite what you'd like, 13-11. It was 9-3 at one point, and then the second half of the season happened. Okay, and as far as moving the chains, there's just one play that sticks out in my head that I've got to let it go. The slide, USC, right before the chains. But as an overall whole, he was a definite upgrade the first half of the season over what we had the season before. I think the second half of the season, teams made adjustments, and I'll put it back on the coaches. You got to be able to adjust to their adjustments. So it's a little bit of both. When Dana Holgorsen comes in and the offense looks within 2 weeks like it did versus Wisconsin, not a great team, but they still moved the ball up and down the field versus Iowa. Didn't score enough points, but there was other things that factored into that. Had no issue moving the ball against Boston College. Just 2 block kicks and some of the other things made that game way more interesting than it should have been. For me, for Dylan Raiola to be more specific, 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio is a must. Not a goal, that's a must. That's not an expectation, that's a must at this point. The goal is 3-to-1. The goal is 3-to-1. And somebody actually pointed something out to me a couple weeks ago. They said, Adam, completing 60% of your passes now in college football, everybody does that with all the bubble screens and all this and that, and the RPOs and the short passes. They're like, if you're not completing 2/3 of your passes, you're not a very good quarterback. I was like, man, that's a fair point. Completion percentages are higher than they've ever been in today's college football and the way offenses are ran. 60% a year ago was the goal because the year before that, we were combined in that quarterback room 51% completion percentage. So 60% was a gigantic jump. Dylan obviously jumped up to 67%. Here's what I would say. Maintain the 67%, but I want the yards per pass to go up. Dane Key averages 14 yards per reception. And Isaiah Hunter, 15 yards per reception. I'm cool if the completion percentage stays 67, doesn't go up at all, don't go down. But if that yards per reception doubled to 14 or 15, or even just 8 or 9, because it was well below that, honestly, 8, 9, 10, I'd be pretty happy with that. And as far as moving the chains, I think that kind of comes back to knowing when to run, being the appropriate weight, which we've discussed, knowing when to run, being able to move quick, be a little bit more nimble on your feet, knowing when to slide, knowing when to go out of bounds, knowing when to lower your shoulder, which is not a lot, but on 3rd and 1, lower the shoulder and fight for that extra yard. Those are my specific goals for Dylan Raiola. What are your thoughts on those things?
Yeah, I like those goals. But you just kind of come back to what's the help around him going to be, that offensive line. I mean, I think some of those goals is like, okay, I think he could definitely be on pace for those. But then we get to the Michigan games, the Penn State games, the Iowa games, when you're playing really good defenses. How much time is he going to have? Obviously we talk about those offensive line. How much will the running game be there to support him? It is, we kind of get this, we just kind of put it all on Dylan, right? We put it all on the quarterback. It's not just Dylan, it's anywhere in football. But there's going to need to be a big step for this offense ahead of him. And again, that's why, when you kind of think about what's the number one thing this spring, there's a lot of different ways to go down it, but that pairing of Holgorsen and Raiola, that's what gives me confidence more than anything. It's just Holgorsen's past working with several different quarterbacks and being able to put up numbers regardless of who it is. Now you give him somebody with the talent of a Dylan Raiola. You put some wide receivers out there. They've done a good job of that. Still going to be that offensive line to see how much time they have, or are you going to have to rely on too much of those dink and dunks where you might have 70% pass completion percentage, but Ja'Cory Barney averages like 7 yards a reception.
Just get the ball in that man's hand in space and let him do his thing. Tavon Austin 2.0. That's what I see. All right, so let's talk about some of those portal guys before we go to break. Nebraska brought in 16 guys through the portal. 1890 stepped up. They spent quite a bit of money. Them and about 6 other teams. There were 7 teams in America that spent more money in NIL, recruiting class, transfer portal players, current players on the team than any other team in the country. Nebraska was one of those 7 teams. All right. This is the biggest class through the transfer portal we've ever had. Like I said, 16 and the most expensive. I would say probably about 12 of them are expected to contribute a lot right away. And as far as the actual amount of guys probably projected to start, I'd say they're about 8. But we'll see what happens throughout these position battles throughout spring. You look at guys like Dane Key, Rocco Spindler, Dawson McCullough on defense. Okay, Williams and Wari. We'll see what happens with defensive lineman Jalen George. I know he's out this spring, but this is a guy who was an all-conference player at a lower level. Now he's playing here at Nebraska. Can he contribute come fall camp, earn a spot? He's a guy we need to help play right away. Elijah Pritchett at the offensive tackle spot. The aforementioned Isaiah Hunter. We've chatted about Hardly Gilmore before as potentially a surprise player or overlooked player. Andrew Marshall has an inside track to potentially earn the starting cornerback job. And maybe along with Ja'Cory Barney, Quentin Ives, one of the returners. I think a lot of people, including myself, expect Marquez Watson-Trent to step in, start, play, hopefully be a tackling machine for us. Don't overlook the guys on the teams of special, Jack McAllister, Kevin Galick, uber important individuals. Special teams cost us at least 2 games last year. Okay. Marcos Davia, quarterback depth, quarterback battle. What happens with him and TJ Lateef, Jalen Gromstad? How does that all work out? The D-line, we have a combined 7 total starts amongst all the defensive linemen in that room. And I don't know that that's a terrible thing. Riley Van Poppel, highly recruited, has played in a lot of games. You can say the same thing about Keona Davis, played in a lot of games. Everyone was really excited. He enters the portal. He comes back, if you remember that, last winter. A lot of talent, a lot of athleticism. They're going to have to play and contribute early. What can they do? All right, some of the other guys, Gabe Moore was the guy that kind of prompted that as I'm looking at his name, the Mississippi State transfer. A guy, you look at his high school stuff. I mean, he redshirted at Mississippi State, but his high school stuff is pretty impressive. We'll see how it translates a couple of years later now that he's at Nebraska. Justin Rhett, Jameer Khan in the secondary. Okay, let's see. Anybody else you can think of that I have not listed just yet? The only other thought I was going to share real quick, and then we'll see what you've got, Jake. We'll go to break. We brought in impact players via the portal. We talked last week about the swings and misses that we've had via the portal, or guys who didn't reach their potential. Isaiah Nayor, Jamal Banks, Micah Mazuka, a lot of these guys that didn't reach their potential. We have had way more than 50% of the portal guys that we brought in not pan out even close to the way we would like. That's a really bad batting average. Great in baseball, softball, almost 500. Not very good in football transfer portal percentage success rate. So that has to be exponentially higher. Exponentially higher. We have brought in some impact players in the past. Zaire Wright, late last summer. Marcus Washington, remember, May 2022. Okay. What are your thoughts there? Then we'll have to break, Jake.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They need a higher hit rate on those transfer portal guys, because I do think we look at it in our mind, like you said, all right, let's give this guy the starting spot here. Let's move this guy in, as many as 8 or 9 of those guys. And, that's good to think. And it would be good to see it play out, because then you're thinking, okay, we're improving the team. We didn't have these guys last year. But at the same time, don't be too upset if a few of those spots are taken by retaining guys. That means that they're getting better. Development within the program is something we've been asking for a long time too. So especially when these kind of high-end guys, it would be interesting to see who we're writing down in pencil to be our starter. If somebody is able to beat them out for that spot, see what the response would be among the crowd. Is maybe are we worried? Did we miss in the portal? Or is there actually a lot of development happening? Because all this portal stuff, and yeah, you can build some quick hit teams through the portal. It's no longer like, I wonder if it can happen. Colorado, Indiana, we've seen these things can happen. But what's been missing at Nebraska for a long time has been elite. They like to use the word elite development. And in year 3 under Matt Rule, that's what I expect. I mean, he's taken off in year 3 the previous stops, and that's a lot of it has to be on development and building that culture and all that stuff. But these individual players that have been in the stable getting better, ready to go, they're looking a lot of that on their offensive line, their defensive line, guys that have been kind of waiting their turn, and those are going to be big positions to see them fill.
Dude, I think our development hasn't even been average. How do you bring in higher, just go back to the Big Ten West days, which wasn't that long ago, 2 years ago. We out-recruited every team in the Big Ten West every year except for one time. One time, Wisconsin had a higher ranked recruiting class than us since we joined the Big Ten years ago, about a decade and a half ago. One time we got out-recruited, yet where did we finish? We have not. How many talented players have we brought in? The development has been subpar, and I'm being absurdly kind. Now, you make a fair point. If a transfer portal guy comes in but he doesn't start, is that because he's not as good as we thought, or somebody beat him out and got better? What I'm pointing at, because that's a fair point, what I'm pointing at is guys who did start and didn't play well. Banks, Nayor. Mazuka did start, got benched. I mean, when you're at the airport the day before a game in the middle of the season, I mean, what in the world is going on? I know they thought he was the most NFL-ready offensive lineman in that offensive line room. I know that. So for me, the guys who actually do end up starting, it can't be because, I was going to phrase this in a not nice way. I don't want to say the lesser of two evils. It's because you're the better of two good players, not you're just the better of what we have. Does that make sense?
Yeah.